In the studio, I have June from Kiwis against Seabed Mining. Good morning, June.
Good morning, Aaron.
You guys are all busy at the moment because of the Chatham Rock phosphate case that's before the EPA.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, and so is this the second case that the Environmental Protection Authority has ever had to do?
Yes, under the new legislation, this is their second case.
But then the new legislation invented them, didn't it?
It kind of did, yes.
Yeah, they didn't really exist before that. I just want to touch a little bit on the first case, which is actually still an issue because TTR, who wanted to mine the seabed off the southern bight of Taranaki, have appealed the result where the EPA said, no, you can't do it, your application's useless. I'm paraphrasing here.
Yes.
So where is that at right now?
The decision-making committee appointed by the EPA to make the decision said there are way too many environmental uncertainties of mining the black sand off the west coast of the North Island.
Yeah.
And so they turned the application down on the basis of that environmental uncertainty, and the only avenue for the company, TTR, to appeal against that was on court points of law.
Yes.
So they are now appealing that through quite an expensive legal process. So they've virtually taken the EPA to court.
Right.
So KASM and some other submitters have actually joined forces with the EPA. Well, they're co-defending that decision.
Yes. Yep.
So that case doesn't come up until probably Marchish next year.
Okay.
So that's in play.
Okay, so that's natural for a big company to do that when there's lots of money at stake.
Yes, and they've kind of, for their credibility, they've kind of got to take it to court. They've laid off most of their staff in New Zealand, which is interesting, but they are still taking that last step. The board decided that they would take it through court. Okay,
so some have said that the EPA was set up just as an organisation that would pass all this stuff, but that hasn't happened. And in actual fact, TTR, Trans-Tasman Resources, they came out, to me it looked like their application really had big holes in it. It was kind of inept, and it was almost as if they thought it doesn't matter what we put in, it'll get passed anyway.
Because
that's a little bit of speculation on my behalf about what's going on behind the scenes, but it doesn't look that way.
Yeah, the government certainly is wooing the mining industry and the mining lobby. Stratera, they have lots of meetings, so Stratera gets a lot of airtime with the government, one-to-one FaceTime.
Okay.
And the government had actually earmarked $25 million worth of taxpayer money to help the TTR application, should it get approved. So the political signals were there.
How much money did KASM get from the government to fight the case?
Absolutely none.
Not even legal aid?
Not even. This wonderful community and New Zealanders in general were the reason that KASM could actually take a stand in the first place.
The fundraising centred around a population of 3,000 people.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, New Zealand. Oh, no, as you say, the people outside of Raglan have contributed. Yeah, let's just go over a little bit the first thing with the seabed mining. Like, what were the significant holes in the application?
In the Trans-Tasman Resources application?
Yeah.
The uncertainties around actually what the environmental impact would be, because they were going to dredge, thousands of square kilometres, 20 k's offshore, and so the sediment plume that was generated from that, excuse me, so the tailings that are sent back into the water after they've taken the iron sand out, which is 90% of what they were dredging, would fundamentally change. So it wouldn't be heavy sand anymore and necessarily settle on the seabed. It would be fine particles, which, of course, there's no walls in the ocean, could extend to quite a far-reaching area.
So they were taking sand and it was getting ground so much it was more the particle size of silt, was that right?
Silt, yeah.
Yeah, which is quite a different thing.
Yeah.
And it's the depth was an issue, wasn't it? They haven't done a lot of mining at that depth?
Yeah, they haven't done a lot of mining at that depth. And so the industry of seabed mining is globally actually quite new because even though there's been a bit of seabed mining for minerals in the past, what they're doing now is going deep. And it's the depths at which they're looking to mine internationally that have never been done before, and that's a huge issue. Okay,
and so obviously the pressure on equipment, and people can't go down there.
No.
So the equipment's got to be sturdy. So there's a lot of unknowns.
Yes.
And again, unknowns about the environmental impact. And so you got the feeling the EPA couldn't do anything other than say, well, it's the information on this is so vague that we really can't make a proper decision.
In a nutshell, it was uncertainties, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're doing their job, Environmental Protection Authority.
Yes, exactly.
Which a lot of people weren't actually expecting, were they?
Yeah.
All right, so we've got that background of this happening around the world, and also we had that with the oil drilling off the coast here. We had the exploration at a depth of, what was that, a few months ago?
Which the permits to oil drill out?
Well, no, actually, it must have been over a year ago. There was actually some oil drilling going on off the coast of Raglan.
Anadarko?
Yeah, Anadarko, yeah. That was kilometres down, wasn't it?
Yeah, slightly separate issue. KASM's about seabed mining, so
yes.
it was oil.
Yeah. But it's the same thing of going in for resources in deep water.
It is.
Yeah, which is suddenly happening.
And that's very damaging because, of course, it's about the noise that's generated underwater because they basically blast. It's like a...
Oh, hold on. So you're talking about the
seismic testing.
The seismic testing. I was talking about the test drill they did.
Yeah.
And before that was seismic testing, and now they've sold the rights to do more seismic testing off the coast here, off the west coast.
Permitted. If you look at the maps on the EPA website, it's frightening how far that's been permitted, how much of our it's been sold, really, permitted for exploration.
Okay, so that's another issue, that there's going to be a lot of seismic testing, and there's suggestions from overseas that's quite detrimental to sea life.
Yep.
We, of course, have the Malwest dolphin here, the world's most famous, smallest dolphin.
At the moment we do.
Yes, at the moment we do. So this whole big picture here. And the back of all that, when we first heard in Raglan about the potential for seabed mining, it was almost 10 years ago. And that's when KASM was set up, Kiwis Against Seabed Mining was set up, wasn't it? Now, you weren't actually part of it back then, but you must have heard the history a little bit.
Well, what's really interesting is that, if you live in the big cities, a little bit away from the coast, then this issue isn't front of mind. I didn't know about KASM until I came to Raglan at the beginning of the year.
Right.
And the more I've been learning, the more concerned I've become, because this is potentially enormously destructive to everybody's environment, and to the long-term effects. If you think about it down the track, what we're doing here is we're polluting huge areas of the ocean, and the general public aren't particularly aware of it. It's not well understood because it's quite technical. Yeah,
although, I mean, in the end, I got my head around the seabed mining with the idea that there was a machine bigger than a house digging several metres deep, chewing it all up, it goes up to a ship, gets ground to dust, the iron gets taken out and it gets spat back down there again. I mean, you visualise that happening to the Canterbury Plains, for instance, and the mess it would leave.
Yeah.
And it's actually quite
it's a really good point, Aaron, because
it's quite a big thing.
If it was happening on land, then the public outcry would be enormous because it's right there in your face. But because it's out in the ocean and we can't see it with our own eyes, the public are, they've got blinkers on because actually it's not well understood. But it's just as devastating as if it was being done on land.
Yeah.
Or probably because you can't fence it off. You can't control it in the ocean.
All right. So now where Kiwis Against Seabed Mining is, there's a case before the EPA about doing some mining on the Chatham Rise.
Yeah.
And that's a long way off the coast of New Zealand. There's not much out there, eh?
Actually, that's it is the most productive fishing ground that we've got. It's a real problem. It's even more damaging to the marine environment than what the TTR case was, because it's so rich in environmental life. It's a feeding ground for lots of mammals. It contains some benthic seafloor life that hasn't been observed anywhere else in the world.
This word benthic keeps coming up. That just refers to the seafloor life. It's a scientific term for that.
Yes.
Okay, all right. And so I guess the phosphate that they want is part of the reason for that, is it?
Yes. So what's happening in the Chatham Rise is they're going in for phosphorite nodules, which gets turned into phosphate, which goes into fertiliser on the land. These rocks of phosphate that live on the sea floor there provide the habitat for some endangered corals that are actually protected under the Wildlife Act.
Yep.
So if you take away the phosphate nodules, you take away the area that the corals can attach to provide the life that the small fish that live on the sea, dismal fish, that provides the life for them, the habitat for them, their home where they live. And if you take away the phosphorite nodules, this area can't regenerate because these ancient corals need that to actually attach to the seafloor.
Now, the way you've described it there was almost like they're going to go in very carefully and cut the phosphate out from underneath the corals, but actually how are they going to do it?
They're going to suction dredge. So they take out, it's a big machine, it's new technology, they dredge the sea floor, probably down to about 0.5 of a metre, so not as deep as they would with the TTR, but they're still taking the whole of that sea floor, half a metre or so deep, and sucking the whole lot up. So everything that gets caught in this, and you're talking about 400 metres deep, so everything that gets caught in the way gets sucked up. It creates an enormous dead zone. So they're destroying that total environment. 5,000 square k's this permit's for, to mine over 35 years if it's granted. That's unprecedented. It's a huge destructive application that's in front of the EPA at the moment.
Now, this application was made pretty much straight after the Seabed mining decision was handed out.
Within days, like
within
17
days,
or 18 days later.
So there's a bit of strategy there.
Yeah.
But the thing that surprises me about both these applications is that they've really gone up against the fishing industry.
Yeah.
And I mean, going for the Chatham Rise, which is a protected area, it's like they're trying. What are they trying to knock off the biggest problem first, the hardest application, get it over and done with?
Yeah. We could speculate. There's
yes.
It's about money for the company, who are backed by a huge global corporate called Boskalis, who are doing the making first time, never tried before anywhere, equipment to take the phosphorite off the floor. So, it's potentially lucrative for this global corporate if they can have a little experiment down here at the bottom of the world and learn a lot from it. Then that's really good for that big company to go, look, we did it successfully in New Zealand and we learned a lot there, and they won't care about the trash marine environment that they left behind. That
I don't know. It's almost like what I said before. Off there don't they normally do things like this off the coast of third world countries?
Yeah.
Like that's where they go and experiment and leave the problems. Like traditionally, that's what's happened in the past. But we've had that, and we've had the Kim.com thing where the New Zealand government says, yes, US government, we'll do whatever you want. We'll go and arrest that guy. And fortunately for us, the New Zealand judiciary has said, well, hold on, that's you didn't do it right. And here the EPA, the New Zealand scientists and bureaucrats on the EPA have also said, no, it's, we shouldn't be doing that.
We shouldn't be doing it.
So we should be thankful that we've got New Zealand people who aren't, well, I was going to say can't be bought off. I don't mean to imply anyone was tried to be bought off, but...
Who are brave enough to speak out.
Yeah, still with the courage to stand up and do what's right. Yeah.
That's a good point, Aaron.
Yeah, that's what I've just been thinking. So,
I can't get my head around why we've got to this point with these very obviously damaging applications. Because if you look at actually what's happening here, it's reasonably obvious that this is a huge problem for the environment. So why is New Zealand letting this untested experimental science into our waters? It doesn't make sense.
So with the Chatham Rise, let's just talk about where things are at with that. Yeah. So they made the application. Yeah. KASM and others have put in objections through the usual process, and now they're having hearings. Yes. Tell me more. Where's that at?
Yeah. So interestingly, there's quite a lot of iwi who've made submissions as well, because let's not forget about the Chatham Islanders.
Yes.
Because this application, it's 450 k's off the coast of basically Christchurch. Christchurch people have no awareness that's happening.
They've got their own problems.
Yes. The Chatham Islanders are concerned about it. So there's a couple of iwi on the islands who've put in quite serious concerns about it, because they do have stewardship or care of that particular part of the ocean. Yep. Chatham Islanders make their living from the fishing in that area, and they don't fish. They're not allowed to fish down the depths of this marine protected environment.
Okay, yep.
So they're quite concerned about it and the impact on the fisheries. Ngāi Tahu are quite concerned about it because, of course, they're whales, and they've got quite a lot of fishing quota in this on the Chatham Rise.
Yes.
and they don't know the impact on the whales. So that's Kaikoura Whale Watch. So there are some iwi particularly concerned about it. Of course, nobody really understands the impact on commercial fisheries. They actually don't know. And so there's a little bit of uranium in this phosphate, so that's sparked a whole debate around how radioactive this material potentially is.
Oh, really? I hadn't heard about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah. And even if it's extracted, then of course some of it will be released into the marine environment. So what's the impact of that on the food chain, really, in the environment, and how cumulative is that over time?
Yep.
And once phosphate's taken out and put on land, then will that hit the food chain for the dairy farmers? Will it impact our ability to sell not only the phosphate overseas? Well, we won't be selling it, the company will. It's not our profit. And will it impact on New Zealand's clean green image? Lots of uncertainty around all of that kind of stuff.
Have they promised jobs for New Zealand with this?
There will be...
For those of you who can't see June, which is everybody, it just rolled her eyes right around the back of her head.
No, not per se. The people who will be on board these ships won't be very many people.
But I know with the Seabed mining application, there was lots of promises about jobs around Taranaki.
Yeah, no.
Have they promised jobs for people with the Chatham Rise application?
They've talked to the Chatham Islanders about their potential for to support the industry and to, they might have people stay on the Chatham Islands from time to time.
Okay.
And they are empty promises and negligible and pittance in terms of what they're trying to offer the Chatham Islanders in the way of monetary compensation. It's just it's insulting.
Yeah. Okay. They're doing submissions this week down in Wellington, aren't they? Like spoken submissions to the decision-making committee.
Yeah. So what's been happening is there's been some of the main submitters who have actually spoken to their submissions, but this has been, till now, there's been a lot of the experts, so there's a lot of scientific experts, and CRP, because they've been capital raising for a lot of money, they've brought in a lot of scientific experts from overseas, brought in a whole lot of opinion with quite limited briefs, and so they've put a lot of expert opinion up. So
what do you mean? Why is limited briefs important?
Well, because if somebody employs an expert, then the question that they ask that expert is on a particular question, like, what's the science around the world on the decibels that what do we know about the deep sea environment, for example,
yep.
in terms of the decibel impact on whales and fish and other mammals. And so that's the question that those experts, for example, have answered, which does not ask them to comment on the bigger picture of the environmental impact.
Oh, so they're trying to limit them saying anything that would be damaging to their case.
Me were included.
Okay.
In my opinion, yes.
You, the individual.
Yes, me, the individual.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So
KASM is partnering with Greenpeace and the deep sea people who, and we're making joint submissions, and the fisheries are making submissions, and the iwi are making submissions. So, but to date, what's happened is the experts have put their evidence forward. So there's been a lot of crunching of the expert data, which has been incredibly interesting, Aaron, because out of that the experts are disagreeing on some critical points,
right?
In terms of the impact, and there are all sorts of unanswered questions. And could we put conditions around the monitoring of that, which is actually not sensible or practical either?
How do you monitor down that deep?
Yes. Well, they're talking about putting observers on board and monitoring the water column to see what the impact of the sediment will be, how far away from the mining area, and, because they're mining blocks and leaving some of the blocks alone, the company's argument is, but, we're leaving that part of the rise alone, so, it will regenerate, but the uncertainties around, well, if we mine on that part, will the water actually take the damage to that part, and could the corals regrow in that part? We're talking about corals that are hundreds of years old here and take such a long time to grow. How
are they supposed to regrow if they've taken all the phosphate away?
That's the point, exactly. That's the point exactly. So interestingly, the corals are grown where the phosphate nodules are. So there's thickets of these corals in these areas. That some of the corals you can find in the areas which are adjacent to the mining blocks, but they're sparse in those areas. So the most rich habitat is right bang smack in the middle of the environment that they're about to devastate.
Okay, all right. So you've had the expert scientific stuff. When does KASM has presented with some scientific evidence?
Yes, so some KASM experts have presented specifically around the most damaging impacts, which are around the benthic environment, so the deep sea environment and that impact, and the mammals as well, and some commentary also on the sediment plume.
Okay. And so they're coming up to Hamilton soon?
Next week. So this is critical time. So we're coming, the DMC, which is the decision-making committee, are coming to Hamilton on the 29th and 30th, so Wednesday and Thursday next week. Yeah. And so KASM will absolutely be there. So Phil McCabe speaking to the KASM submission and, of course, his own submission, and various other people from Raglan and from KASM are also speaking to their personal submissions.
So people have made personal submissions. Have you done one?
Yes, I have.
Okay, yeah.
Yes. So we'll be speaking to those, my first time, which is interested in the process. And what would be really awesome is if we could show from Raglan, because they moved it to Hamilton because we specifically said, please, can you have one in Hamilton? So they said yes to KASM having a hearing in Hamilton. Okay. We would like to populate the hearing space with just people to show a bit of solidarity around the fact that we are aware of it and we are concerned about it, because we haven't had time to raise an awful lot of public awareness around it.
Not like with the first application with the people had 10 years for that one. Yeah.
This one was days or weeks. So
so those days again.
So the 29th and the 30th of October.
What days of the week are they?
Wednesday and Thursday.
Crikey.
At the Kingsgate Hotel in Hamilton.
Time is racing by.
It is. But if anybody's around on those days, it would be awesome if people came and gave KASM a bit of support, actually, in the hearing process. Okay,
cool. All right. And how's finance for KASM at the moment?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's just as well we've got a lawyer and his team who are basically prepared to do it, because they believe in it so passionately. We at the moment we haven't got funds to pay them,